Hi, good evening, and welcome to Gender Speaker Live, where tonight I'm going to be talking about gender stereotypes, something that's come up because I'm working with a client, an international client, and that's the big topic. I thought it's worth having a look at that on the show. So, gender stereotypes. I've touched on this a bit back in September, looking at unconscious bias, and we're going to verge into that again tonight. But I want to specifically just focus on the whole issue of stereotypes, the impact that has on us, and maybe what we can start to do in the office and in the workplace to stop using stereotypes because of the damaging impact that they have. So let's start with a very simple question. What are gender stereotypes? Well, let me bring in a slide now and have a little look at just a couple of definitions. These are the Oxford and the Cambridge definitions of what stereotypes are. The Oxford Dictionary says a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. I think that's the big part about stereotypes. It's taking a small number of qualities about someone, a man, a woman, someone who's Asian, black, white. We take a couple of features, often very negative ones, and create that stereotype. So if I, say a particular, let's just take Africa as a thing. What is the immediate image that comes to mind if I say Africa? And there are going to be various different images. I've asked this in a number of workshops where I've been doing unconscious bias training. And for some people, Africa coins images of the savannah, images of elephants and lions, images of animals, images of African villages. Others, if I say Africa, have a much more of the image that Bob Geldof had, images of deprivation, of poverty, of children, of war-torn areas, of children starving. So we've got different images of Africa depending upon our experiences. And that's part of the problem of stereotypes, is that they're largely based upon our knowledge and experiences. Well, Cambridge Dictionary says a fixed idea that people have about someone or something, about what someone or something is like, especially an idea that is wrong. And this is also the part, those images I gave you of Africa, both are true. Both of those are images of Africa, but they are not the whole of Africa. Africa is a huge continent with such a variety of different images. I got shocked when I first went to China. I had an image of China. It was a very stereotypical image of a peasant country, a country that was relatively poor, over a billion people. But people living, I was seeing straw hats and people in paddy fields. And we drove in from the airport into Shanghai along a huge motorway with, flashy cars going past and huge gleaming buildings. And it was just not my image of what I was expecting. When I got to Shanghai, a completely different, vibrant city, totally and completely in contrast to everything I thought was going on in my head. So there's the challenge. That's the problem that we've got. So this is the challenge. All stereotypes are true. Men are taller than women. Women are faster than men. I'll come back to that one in a minute because black men run faster than white men. Asian people are better at maths. These are all stereotypes. And to an extent, they do what scientists call empirical generalizations. If you take a random group of men and a random group of women and you measure the heights of the men and women, the average height of all the men will be a couple of inches higher, more than the average height of all the women. But of course, it's a stereotype. It's an average. It's a statistic. It doesn't mean that men are taller than women, because there will be women there who are taller than men. In fact, it may be that the tallest person in the room is a woman, and yet because the shortest person in the room is also a woman, the average height of the women is less than the men. But making an assumption that men are taller than women is a difficult thing to do. Women are fatter than men. Why do we get that assumption? Why does that statistic arrive? Where does that stereotype come from? Well, women are more likely to be on diets. We know that from the statistics. Women do actually have a layer of fat on their bodies, which is greater than men's. Men tend to convert more of their fat to muscle and have more muscle. Now, these are averages. I was watching Strictly Come Dancing, and her name's completely escaped me for the moment, but the first female Olympic gold medalist at boxing is a dance partner. Also dancing with a woman, which breaks all the stereotypes of a dance competition. Two women dancing together, and one of them is a boxer, with huge muscles, very powerful. I don't want to go to a ring with her. I've no way that I will be able to get anywhere close to winning a fight with this woman, because she has far more muscle, way more than, and I'm definitely a lot fatter than her. Okay, so I used to be a man. So black men run. All of these are stereotypes. We know that some men from Kenya, tend to be better in marathons, tend to be better at a lot of the running. It doesn't make all white men less effective than black men. That isn't what it is. It doesn't mean all Asian people are the best mathematicians. Some white people, some Chinese people, all sorts of people are very good at maths. On average, you may find that there are more Asian people in the good maths group than any others. But it doesn't also mean that all Asian people are good at maths, because that is the assumption that tends to be made from that kind of stereotype. So here's our problem. Stereotypes are not always true for all people. That's the big challenge. They're true, but they are not true for all people. And if we make those assumptions, we're going to run into trouble. This is the second problem about stereotypes. Positive and negative. Positive stereotypes are just as bad as negative stereotypes. Making an assumption that all women are nurturing, all women look after children. No, some women don't want babies. Some people don't. Women don't want to look after babies. Some men love childcare. Okay? We make stereotypes and then we take negative images of it. Just take a look at this. Just think about qualities seen as positive in men, often seen as negative in women. And I'm particularly thinking here in terms of leadership. So let's just have a look at a group of adjectives describing a leader. Assertive, decisive, competitive, risk-taking, powerful, focused. Am I talking about a man or a woman? If I use those adjectives, it's quite likely you're going to assume that I'm talking about a man, because that's the stereotypical image of a male leader, this assertive, powerful, driven man who pushes the company forward. Now, what if I was talking about a woman using those adjectives? How would you feel about the woman? My guess is that it's likely you might have a negative view of the woman, seeing her as a very cold, harsh woman, whereas the man would be seen as positive, because those are positive qualities in a man, but when we apply them in a woman, we suddenly see those as negative qualities. If it's a woman, we would rather be seeing emotional, caring, nurturing, compassionate, cautious, supportive, because those are good qualities in a woman. Actually, good qualities in a leader, certainly in the 21st century. But if we described our leader in those terms, and if I was talking about a man, I can pretty much guarantee most people would tend to take a negative image of a man, seeing him as a weak leader, liable to be run roughshod over by other more decisive, assertive, powerful leaders. This is the challenge with stereotypes. Leaders are leaders. They use all those qualities. What we actually want to see is probably most of those qualities in any leader, whether they're male or female. But because we've got these stereotypes of men and women and what we expect of men and women, we mess things up. And it leads to this sort of problem. Let's just say, I take the word woman. It's an identity label. Okay, it happens to be that 51% of the population, of the world's population, are female, but not all women are the same. We know that. But there's a tendency to immediately think, and I certainly get this in the battles against me, you can't be a woman because you were once a man. What is a woman? What makes someone a woman? And if I ask that question, you're going to start to list qualities, list things that you expect of a woman. Many of them will be physical, to do with giving birth, having children, shapes of their bodies, sound of their voice, all of those things. And if I don't fit that stereotype, then I start to be in trouble. But what if a woman doesn't fit that stereotype? What if a woman doesn't have long hair? What if a woman has a deep voice? What if she dresses in very masculine clothes? What do we then think about the woman? Well, what happens then is that she's fitted into a new stereotype that says, "Oh, not a proper woman. Now this is a lesbian woman." And maybe absolute rubbish. But because we've got this stereotype that says lesbian women have short hair, they do male masculine jobs, tend to wear masculine clothes, they're in relationships and they take masculine. Why everybody assumes that there are poems about it, aren't we? Who wears the trousers? This is a stereotype. You cannot tell just by looking at somebody whether they are lesbian or whether they are not. You cannot tell from just looking at somebody and say, "Oh, they're trans." Because I know a lot of women who constantly have a huge problem of being perceived to be transgender. They're not. They just have quite masculine-looking features. But because we have a stereotype of what a proper woman should look like, we then start to negatively impact people who don't fit the stereotype. Same with a man. We have these qualities, we have these ideas of what it means to be a man. And if somebody doesn't fit, it's very quick to say, "Oh, they must be gay." When some people see me, I used to see somebody who's a transvestite. What's a transvestite? It's a term that's not used very much now, but I brought it out because it's gone out of fashion because of the negative stereotype that became attached to it. What people saw was that a transvestite was someone, usually male, dressing in the clothes of someone who is female for sexual gratification. Now, I've interviewed lots of transvestites, people who identified as transvestites, when I did my master's degree, and that certainly is nowhere close to where they are. They are transgender, and that's a term that we use now all the time. And yet I see definitions, people written in books saying transvestites don't see themselves as transgender. Transgender is an umbrella term of anyone who doesn't fit inside that sense of being a man or being a woman. And that creates all sorts of difficulties because we have this stereotype in our heads that people are one or the other and that they fit a stereotypical image of what it means to be a man or a woman. I want to show you a short video just for a second. Let's come out of our and just have a quick little look at this video and we'll pick up on it.
School years, children have a strong sense of gender identity and gender role expectations. Most 2-year-olds know with certainty whether they are male or female, and by the age of 4 or 5 begin not only to develop gender constancy, but often show rigid standards for what they believe is appropriate male and female dress and behavior.
Can boys put on dresses? Do girls have short hair or long hair?
Long hair.
Are you a boy or a girl?
A boy.
Are you ever going to be a girl?
No.
What are boys like?
I don't know.
Are they different than girls? How are they different than girls?
Because they don't put stuff like girls on.
Boys don't put on girls' clothes?
No.
Can girls put on boys' clothes?
No.
Alexis, are you a boy or a girl?
A girl.
Are you ever going to be a boy?
Mm-mm.
Are you a boy or a girl?
Boy.
Are you ever going to be a girl?
No. Boys are better than girls.
Why?
Because boys are stronger than the girls sometimes.
What would happen if you put on a dress?
All the girls and all the boys will laugh at me. That one look like a boy, that one look like a girl.
Would it be okay?
No way.
Young children appear to begin to acquire gender role stereotypes at about the same time that they develop gender identity, and by the age of 3 or 4, most children, when asked questions about the activities appropriate for a male doll and a female doll, readily give stereotypic responses.
Which doll likes to clean the house?
This one.
Who takes care of the babies?
This one.
Who goes to work?
This one.
So that's a little bit old, that video, but not that old. Things haven't changed that quickly. In fact, things when it comes to gender and such like don't change very quickly. But you can see right from an early age, those attitudes are embedded into us. They're embedded in the way in which we think and in all sorts of areas. So let's just have a look at some of the other aspects of this. So I brought this up when we were a few weeks ago when we talked about unconscious bias. Stereotypes lead to unconscious bias. They lead to hidden prejudice, because if we have a stereotypical image or view of somebody, then it's likely to impact our attitudes. And that comes from all sorts of things. We see those children there at ages, 3 and 4, 5 years old, rigidly built views of gender roles and gender stereotypes. But we get that, it still comes all the time. I'm hearing it all the time now that we've, particularly to do with immigration, to do with race, all sorts of views, the whole raft of Islamophobia we've seen over the past 10 years or so, coming from people making assumptions that all people who are Muslim must be the same as a terrorist. And they're not, of course. Nothing like it. There are a small minority, the terrorists, who behave like that. I'm old enough to have grown up at a time when we were constantly fearful of IRA bombs or bombers from Germany, from part of extremist groups. Extremists are extremists. There's more similarity between the various extremists than between the rest. In fact, IRA bombers were being sent to the Middle East to be trained by the same groups of people that we now look at and see as the Islamic terrorists. So there's a much more connection between terrorists than there is between normal people, ordinary people. So those attitudes and beliefs, they come from TV, they come from constant videos. If you look at films, constantly we see the male protagonist is the hero, and the reward for fulfilling the quest, getting to the end, being successful, the reward so often is a woman. And women are often in a film purely to be the reward for the male protagonist. Even when the woman is the heroine, even when the woman is actually the main protagonist, very often they suddenly lose all their strength and become completely and totally, goggle-eyed for a man. I don't know. We create a sense of unreality that then everybody has to try and live up to, because these are stereotypes which we constantly impose upon people all the time. Let's just have a look. What happens if you don't like someone? Because this is the problem we've got. Very often stereotypes are negative. And as a result of having that negative stereotype, we then meet someone and we don't like them. And I feel this a lot of the time. If I go into a shop and somebody recognizes me as being transgender, and often when I speak, they pick that up. And this is the sort of thing I see. When you don't like someone, there's some avoidance. Let's avoid that person. I have a black friend of mine who says she walked into a shop. It was a quite upmarket clothes shop. But because she was black, she was immediately assumed to be relatively poor. So none of the assistants wanted to come and serve her. They weren't going to get any commission from this. This was just somebody, wandering in. She was extremely wealthy and ready to buy some very expensive clothes, but she was completely and totally ignored. and eventually left the shop and went somewhere else. Avoidance because of a stereotype. Less eye contact. I get this all the time. People speak and they don't want to look and don't look up from the till, don't look. And I get so annoyed with that. Shorter communications. I'm not going to get into a conversation, just going to deal with the brevity of the conversation. Is smile less. We listen less. The rapport between two people becomes much closer. And that doesn't matter what it is. If you don't like someone or if you're uncomfortable with someone, this is what will happen unconsciously. You may not realize you're doing it, but that is what actually happens. I've watched it, seen it happen so many times when I've walked into shops and the way people have treated me. So what happens then? Slower follow-up. If I want some service, I want some help. My request goes to the bottom of the pile. Nobody does the extra mile. Nobody runs around and tries something extra. Although if you thought that this person that came in fitted the stereotype of wealthy, rich person who might tip well, then suddenly the follow-up gets much faster. Yeah, that doesn't work in any business. It encourages hostility in others because if somebody is treating me in this way, on this idea, avoidance, less eye contact, I'm going to get a little bit annoyed about the way I'm being treated. So I start to get a little bit, sharper in my communications, and I can be pretty sharp when I'm feeling it come. I'm much more likely to complain if I'm not being treated very well, or if the service I get is poor. Yeah, I'm really, really awful at complaining, and I will complain directly to somebody I didn't like the service. It reduces levels of cooperation, creates all sorts of negative body language. Start seeing arms being folded, people tutting, getting impatient. All of that happens simply because two people don't like each other, or one person doesn't like someone, and their body language betrays the fact that that's the case. All too often, that's because of a negative stereotype that they've picked up on the person that's come in. Somebody walks in, they look poor, so they don't get treated so well. It also affects what's going on in our internal relationships within any organization, where you're working with people. Stereotypes lead to favoritism. Stereotypes feed our biases. And if we don't like someone, if we feel uncomfortable about someone, if we feel we'd rather not have, we're more likely to give the good jobs. If we're a manager, we give the good job to somebody that we feel more comfortable with. So favoritism, that impacts the way everybody else feels, starts to cause all sorts of hostility. It raises or lowers expectations. And we know from countless experiments that have been done, if you tell someone that they aren't as good, then they will end up not being as good. And what comes out here is also a thing called stereotype bias. And this is being studied quite a lot now, that if someone, let's take a woman going into a maths test, is reminded of being a woman, and it doesn't need to be reminded that women aren't as good at maths as men. If somebody believes in a stereotype that says they're not as good as, just reminding them of the stereotype will be sufficient to actually reduce their performance in a test. And exactly the same way, if you remind somebody of a positive stereotype, that will improve their performance. That's just the way we are. We have these stereotypes in ourselves, and we fit ourselves into those stereotypes. If it's a negative one, we'll tend to react to it. It reduces motivation, messes up inclusion and exclusion. And that's the very simple thing that we're going to go for a drink after work. Oh, let's not invite the tranny. It happens. I know it happens. In-group versus out-group. Now, this can be a simple thing about, friendly banter and competition over a, what do we call it? A football team, or it can be the men versus women, the white versus the black. All of this happens. It often is happening unconsciously, but it creates that in-group versus out-group. Gossiping and bullying, discrimination, and of course all of this leads to a toxic atmosphere, which results in greater levels of discrimination claims. So that's just some idea of the sorts of challenges that come about as a result of basically bias leading to, or stereotypes leading to bias within the workplace. So that's pretty much the most of what I wanted to talk about today. The stereotypes which affect me are quite significant. I could probably pick up on those at some time in the future, but it's we've got a toxic battle going on at the moment between feminists versus trans people. I try to stay out of it. Try to feed some proper information into it, because very often stereotypes are based upon misinformation, miscommunication, misunderstandings about the way things are. There is a strong sense that, this is just some kind of lifestyle choice, that this is something we choose. Trust me, there is no way, if you knew what life was like for a trans person, you would know there is no way that any person would choose this lifestyle. It has made my life so much tougher, so much more difficult. I was on a pretty good trajectory before I changed gender, and everything came to a standstill. I've had to work really hard just to survive, because I know that I'm less likely to get employed. I'm less likely to get contracts for jobs. I've had to shift everything around so that people employ me because I'm transgender, rather than refuse to contract me because I'm transgender. It's a constant challenge. People talk about me behind my back. People giggle about me. They laugh. All of this because there are stereotypes. I've even had somebody once at an exhibition burst out laughing and run off because he just couldn't even keep the conversation going. His bias and his uncomfortableness with being with me was so severe. Somebody came and apologized for him. But it made me think, well, I don't particularly want to do business with this company if that's the way, if they don't train their staff, if they don't actually make sure that the staff that are dealing with me know how to handle difference. And this is the challenge that we've got more often than not. The problem with stereotypes is that if I don't conform to your stereotype of how you believe that men, women, whatever should be, managers, if I don't fit that stereotype, and you therefore are unable to communicate and effectively have a work with me, then that is going to lead to disharmony. It's going to lead to me not wanting to do business with you. And that's not good for your business. That's not good generally for office harmony. It is not good in any way for everybody. So that's the end of my talk on stereotypes. Big challenge. I'm going to be looking at it more and more over the next couple of weeks as I prepare for the big panel I'm on for my international client. You can find my Gender Speaker live show on YouTube. It's on Facebook. It's also on as a podcast, although that's usually about a week behind on the podcast. Well, I'm catching up now. Don't forget that I'm running a transgender non-binary inclusion workshop on the 17th of November right here online on Zoom. I've been looking at all sorts of ways to make that much more engaging and much more fun. It's a good workshop to try and get, it'll summarize a lot. I mean, if you've been watching some of the my Gender Speaker live shows, you'll have picked up some of the ideas. But this is going to be much more concentrated down on how do we make the workplace much more inclusive? How do we include people who don't fit in? And so to a large extent, it's picking up on this thing. People don't meet the stereotypes. Now, how do we make sure that we make people feel included because they don't fit our stereotypes of what people should be? Or perhaps they do fit a stereotype that you don't like, because that's one of the challenges trans people find is we change from being male to being female, and then all of a sudden we're wearing high heels and low-cut tops, and we're being the stereotypical woman. And this is why I often have a bit of a battle with feminists who actually aren't stereotypically female. They actually battle against female stereotypes. They don't wear makeup. They don't wear high heel shoes. They don't wear skirts and dresses. They're much more masculine in their appearance. Some. And, if I'm not careful, I'll get into the stereotype of the danger of stereotyping all people who are feminists as somehow looking very more masculine, which they are not. People are people. We all present ourselves in our own way. Join me on this workshop. We'll have a look at what that all means and how you can become more inclusive. I'm also back on Sunday with my 4 p.m. LGBT history show. I'm going to be doing this every week. February is LGBT History Month, or LGBTQ History Month, as we're now increasingly moving towards. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show today, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday, or join me on the 17th of November. It's a donation-based event. Pay what you can afford. I'm recommending about £20, but pay what you can afford, and I look forward to seeing you there. Bye for now.